Right. Well, good afternoon. Let's jump in. What I'd like to do is start with your origin stories, and then we're gonna roll forward to where you're at in your current lives. But I've been asking everyone to share their first recollections of where non-monogamy came in contact with their lives. It could have been you read an article or a friend mentioned something. But I'd like you to put it in the context of when you first heard it and where you were at in your life and how you were showing up in your relationships in your life at that point in time. And then kind of how those streams came together. Does that make sense? So
Yes. Yeah. Okay, so I'll start because it was my idea. So in my previous marriage with my second husband, we were struggling. We struggled the whole time. And one night I had my best friend over and she and I consumed a couple of bottles of wine between us. And my husband stayed downstairs and she and I went upstairs to look at something on the computer. And at one point, she just was there in front of me. She got down on her knees in front of me and started kissing me. And in the fog of of the wine, I was like, "What is going on? And please don't stop." So we kind of made out for a bit. We didn't go too far. Um, and then I said, "Okay, we've got to stop. Like my husband is downstairs." So she left, and right after she left, I told him what happened, and so we started talking about, well, what could we do about this? Like it was really fun, and obviously he was, turned on by it, and he said, I'd be open to having a threesome with her. Like he wasn't stupid, and so so I asked her, and she was okay with that, and that's how it started. So we had maybe three or four threesomes with her. And at one point, my husband said, I'm not comfortable with this. I feel like you like her more than me. And I had to admit to myself, not to him, yeah, that's probably true, actually. So it wasn't too much longer after that the marriage ended. And when I met Liam and we had our first lunch together, I told him this story and that I had recently discovered that I was bisexual and I was really enjoying exploring it with that same friend. And anyone I was with moving forward had to be okay with me continuing you know, to explore things with women in some fashion. And so Liam was not turned off by that idea. And that's how I knew we were meant to be.
Yeah, so Kate told me all of this at the very first lunch we had where the possibility of a romantic relationship was discussed. So we had known each other as acquaintances for 3 years. And at some point we made a hard turn away from mere acquaintances because we were church acquaintances into the possibility of something more. And so she told me the story that she just told you. And she was at that time sleeping with this woman. And I said, or I immediately felt that I had learned a lot about Kate because this story was, I was coming out of a relationship that was very repressed sexually. And so as soon as a woman tells you that she's having sex with her female best friend, you know a lot of things about her, especially if you've met her at church and don't know if she's even sex positive. She might as easily have said, I think sex is overrated. But when you know this about someone, you also know that they are a seeker, that they are questioning the rule book that they were raised with. And that was the kind of person that I was looking for. So we began having threesomes with this person in the first few years of our relationship. And that was our introduction to non-monogamy. We didn't have a name for it outside of the word threesome, which I did know. And and they were great. And it was just sometime later that Kate told me the story of a friend who was involved in a very dysfunctional MMF situation. So two men and a woman. And I'd never considered the possibility. I thought the word threesome meant two women and a man. I never considered that there were other ways to do the math. And so as soon as I heard the story, I immediately got this feeling that I recognized many times later in my journey, which is I have to do this thing that I just heard about. We have to make this happen. I've never thought about it before. I now am obsessed with seeing you with another man in the context of a threesome. So we set about to find the right candidate, and the right candidate turned out to be Kate's ex-boyfriend.
Who is our dentist.
Yes.
So yeah, so we had these threesomes with my best friend for about 1.5 years, and then she coupled up and was no longer open to being open. So conveniently, the dentist said yes, and then for the next 1.5 years, he was our regular threesome partner. So for our first 3 years in the lifestyle, it was basically just these two people who themselves were single and became our thirds on a regular basis, and we became very close and had lots of really intimate times with them. And then once we started looking into what is this thing we're doing, we started finding out, oh, there's this thing called swinging and the lifestyle, and we checked out a club and we went to hedonism, and then the rest is history.
Wonderful. Can I ask, when the let's say those first 3 years or so, while you were exploring the threesomes with these two different partners, how long ago was that, just time wise?
That was in 2012, 2013.
Okay, yeah, just trying to get some context around timelining. And as you went into those experiences and then you started to explore, like, what is this? And you started to discover, there are other areas of this lifestyle, etc., that you could tap into. How did you find those sources? Was it just internet? Were you connected to some blogs or some books or anything like that?
It was just the internet. So I think Liam was the one who was leading the charge there. So he was doing a lot of searching online for places we could go and other ways we could explore this. So he found the first club we went to, and we went to that club for at least 1 year and never touched anyone else. So it's just that erotic energy and exhibitionism that kept us coming back. And then we went to hedonism for the first time, maybe 2 years into our relationship. And that blew the doors wide open, because we had lots of conversations there with people who were like, oh, what online dating sites are you on? And we're like, what are you talking about? I don't think we have an online dating site. So then we had to figure out like which one was best for our area. And then once we got plugged into that, we had lots of dates with people who had, parties that they invited us to and events that they told us about. And we just got plugged into the community. And we started writing our own blog in 2016 because we felt like there were a lot of people out there just telling sexy stories, but not a lot of people kind of plumbing the depths of the emotional impact of this lifestyle. So we wanted to really dig deep into how we were feeling as we explored these things. So yeah, we started that because we couldn't find it, so we made it.
Fantastic approach to many of life's situations. In those early years when you were exploring with these other partners, your formative years, if you will, how was that for you emotionally? Was it something that created areas of tension or eroticism, communication gaps, or areas that you had to, really dig deep into to try and solve? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, when we had that first experience with Kate's ex-boyfriend, the dentist, we were very excited about it. And we had planned what turned out to be a foursome, because our first female partner said, oh, I want to be a part of that, when she heard about it. So I went into it with great hope and expectation. And that was the first time I confronted not only what I would call an erection failure, but a libido failure. So I completely could not perform the way I wanted to. I could not get into a sexual headspace. And it hit me like a freight train. And you know the way our internal accusers work, I was berating myself that this man who was 5 years older than me, not in as good a shape as I am, struggles with self-confidence. And he was hard as a rock from the first minute to the last. And I had all these seeming advantages over him, yet could not get into a sexual headspace at all. And where it might be an option to say, isn't that interesting? I should really explore that more. I was completely plunged into a very specific kind of depression and self-doubt.
Which made me, of course, say, we are never, ever, ever, ever doing that again. It
So
was fun, but not fun enough to, to warrant his deep anxiety and pain over it. So I said, that's it. Only women from now on, which was totally fine with me.
so Liam, in the earlier scenario where it was with Kate's female friend, there were no shall we say performance moments in there or anxiety around that? That was all fine?
Yes, it was. And that's mainly because I was interacting with Kate and she was interacting with her friend. There was very little interaction between myself and the friend.
Gotcha. So kind of like you were sticking with the familial connection,
Right.
and enjoying the eroticism that she was sharing with her friend.
Yes, and having a witness to what we do together was powerful. But, in spite of taking it so hard that first time, I did within a few days start to think, oh, I should not close the book on this type of experience, that that maybe with some adjustments, we could do better, that there was a flicker of hope beyond like the dark clouds I had experienced in the bedroom. So I came to Kate and said, you know what, I really want to try this again. And as she
It's like, are you crazy? No.
it was like, yeah, no, we should not do that. So I really convinced her that I could handle it if things didn't work out well, but they did work out, not perfectly, but just a little bit better. And so we continued to see him once a month, and they continued to get better and better and better and better. And soon we were having just an amazing time with him.
Yeah, I think one day we spent like 10 hours
Right.
having sex like 5 or 6 times. And it was a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I had sex with you 5 times, and he had sex with you 5 times. You had sex 10 times.
Amazing.
That's solid, to say the least. So, Liam, can you shine a little light on that process that you went through? Like, I mean, that would be very easy to take those dark storm clouds and just stick with them. So how did you slowly help them dissipate to the sunny skies of 10 hours of sexual delight? How did you, I mean, what I'm trying to get to is like there's got to be a process there. It can't just be like it happened on its own. You had to show up for yourself in a particular way. I'm sure Kate as well was part of that equation. Can you shed a little light on that for us?
Well, I think I have a temperament that doesn't give in easily to negativity. So I'm an entrepreneur by nature. I'm a very positive person. So I generally walk into any problem assuming that it can be solved. And sometimes it's solved through a technique or an innovation of some sort. And sometimes it's just solved by sheer patience, like just the willingness to keep showing up. So I think that's the part of my psyche that I tapped into on this occasion. And, I started experimenting with the various drugs, Cialis and Viagra and some other homier remedies. But overall, with him, it was familiarity that solved it. But I by no means solved the issue of erectile function in group sex situations, because it just came up again and again and again as I went into different situations after that.
Yeah. Well, I thank you for sharing that. I love that insight into your persistence and solution mindset. I can definitely connect with that and feel great resonance. If I were a shall we say, someone on the outside of non-monogamy looking in at that, that sounds like a heck of a lot of, shall we say, turmoil to go through when you could just stick with your wife, your partner. Why go through that journey? What's the incentive or the motivation? What is it addressing or giving you that makes it worthwhile to go, I'm still going to show up?
Well, there are a couple of aspects to it. One is, you know, if you say to anyone generally who's sexually oriented, if you think 2 hands are good, how about 4 hands? If you think 2 breasts are good, how about 6 breasts? And so it's, you know, it's very basic. More is better. So I had the sense that this was something that I should enjoy. It's frustrating to me that I'm not enjoying it. I want to find out why that is. But I think another thing driving me was a sense of privation in my youth. So when other people say, oh, remember when we were 18 and we were fucking everything in sight? I say, no, that was not what 18 was like for me. 18 was wondering if anyone found me attractive, finding girls largely indifferent to my presence. And so I had some healing to do in that regard. And I think that was a part of what was driving me too, that I am going to have this sexual awakening, which for so many people happens at 18 or 22. I'm going to have it at 52. And I applied myself to making sure that I did not give up too early on having those kinds of very human experiences, even if decades later than everyone else.
That's fucking awesome. I love that. Yeah, I think you touched on earlier that prior to your union with Kate, that you were in a relationship that was very, I think, was it sex negative or sex deprived or sexually repressed?
All of the above.
All of the above. Okay, touching on.
Well,
How long was that relationship for?
it was a fleeting 26 years.
Of
26 years.
yeah. Dating before.
Yeah. So a very long time to not have sexual fulfillment or sexual enjoyment. Yeah.
Right.
Wow. That's yeah, that could be some pretty strong incentive. Wow. So
And even though I had 2 major affairs during that 26-year marriage, but an affair is a very, very imperfect solution to that level of privation. So the hoops you have to jump through to find a partner, to get to that partner, to not rouse suspicion, to find someone who's even willing to have that kind of relationship, and then to see them very rarely and furtively is not an ideal solution. So that's why when I met Kate later and found someone who demonstrated with a single sentence about her relationship with her best friend that she was sexually free in a way that I was unaccustomed to, that was a real breakthrough for me. That was a beacon of light. Like, this relationship that I thought was possible in a healthy, open sense that I had only had hints of in the affair setting was extremely motivating for me.
yeah, I can imagine. I think a lot of the world knows about non-monogamy, but in a non-consenting kind of way, where it is adulterous or, you know, nefarious, etc., and is only going to yield greater levels of shame potentially. You know, it's rarely going to have open communication, joyous connection associated with it, and shall we say, liberty, you know, to a high degree.
Well, and for me,
yeah, please.
sorry, I was liberated in a different way because I grew up with a lot of body issues. So I was anorexic through high school and some of university, and really hated my body and felt ugly and didn't think anyone was interested in me. And so to experience that first time on the nude beach at Hedonism, where I looked around and saw all kinds of bodies in all kinds of shapes and sizes, and realized, first, I am not the worst among the among these people, and second, everyone has something sexy and beautiful about them, and it's not always or even often physical. You know, it's that sexy confidence or that smile or that sense of humor that makes someone attractive. And I started realizing, oh, that little thing that I don't like about myself, nobody's looking at that. And it helped me to embrace my body and my sexuality in a way that I had never done before. So I was in my late 30s at that point.
Wow. And is that something that has continued to blossom for you in terms of that feeling confident and comfortable in your own skin, embracing the loveliness of you?
It comes and goes. I think I'm much more able to believe in my sexual attractiveness when I'm in a sexual space. When I'm in, you know, the darkness of my own mind at 3 a.m., that's when the demons come back. But I can very confidently and happily be naked in a group of people and not feel like I'm lacking anything. So in the sexual space, I feel quite confident, and that's definitely been a new thing for me in the past decade.
Oh, that's so cool. Yeah, I think recently we've been going to a day spa. It's a non-sexual context. It's very much, yeah, desexualized. It's just about the come enjoy warm waters, get naked. And it's felt like such a relief to be able to be naked in front of others in a winter time. I mean, our winter's less severe than yours, but it's still not like I'm going to walk outside without my clothing on. And it, in the winter hibernation months, if you will, to like find that liberty of being able to just be naked and to see others in that context as well, has definitely, I found it very soothing over, you know, and I hadn't realized how much I was missing just nudity outside of the bedroom context or, you know, a party context, if you will. So yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize the almost the therapeutic aspects of just being naked, of being seen and seeing others without it needing to be arousal, without it needing to be judgment. It's just acceptance. So yeah, I definitely love those things.
Mm-hmm.
Am I right in recalling that you both come from fairly religious backgrounds? You mentioned that you knew each other through church. How has that played into the equation and the evolution of your relationship? Obviously, certain things like consensual non-monogamy aren't exactly part of the. I'm pretty certain they're not in the 10 Commandments, but I could be wrong.
Well, if you go back to Solomon, who had what, 700 wives, it's in the Bible. It's
Yeah,
fine.
that's it. Yeah, 700.
Well, for me, I think I was very lucky and rare in that I grew up in a religious born again home that was quite sex positive. So my parents were very open about their sexual attraction, and they would always, you know, kiss and grab each other. And my dad would smack my mom's ass every time he walked by. And my mom would always say, sex is wonderful. Sex is beautiful. God made sex to be enjoyed. But then there was always the caveat with your, you know, spouse. So I think I took the good things from that message. I took the sex is wonderful, sex is great, and you know, I tried with my first husband to wait until marriage, but we, you know, slipped up when we were engaged, and he was, you know, we were both very religious. But for me, it was like, you know what? God sees my heart. He knows I love this man. I respect him. I'm committed to him. Whatever, like sex is great. So I never had that sex shame to overcome, thankfully. And then I kind of applied the same logic to our sexual partners outside of our marriage, that I love them. I respect them. You know, I feel in a way like we're honoring each other by having this beautiful friendship that just has no boundaries. And sometimes we just hang out, and sometimes we hug and kiss. Sometimes we even have sex. But it's that same kind of beautiful connection that I felt early on. Like, God can't hate this. This is beautiful. Like this is what love should look like. So for me, it hasn't been a problem really to overcome.
Whereas for me, People talk about being raised in a sex positive or sex negative home. I was raised in a sex oblivious home, as if sex did not exist. And so, example I like to give, if my mother or father had ever said of someone of the opposite sex, oh, there's an attractive person. So forget about leering, forget about mentioning body parts. I can't conceive of my mother or father recognizing attractiveness in another human being. It's like sex did not exist. And so with the teaching of the church that I belong to, I became very much a person who bought into that sex is only right during marriage. So much so that even as a very horny 18-year-old, you could not. I was to think of the example. If a beautiful young woman had come to me and said, my apartment's just over there. I want you to come and have sex with me. And I'm actually going to give you $500. And I was broke too. I'm going to give you $500 to have sex with me. No strings attached sex. I was said, no, I can't do it. And if she said, but no one will know, I'll say, but God will know. And that's enough of a deterrent for me. So that's the kind of background that I emerged from later. So I
he was a virgin when he got married at 23.
Yes. Yeah. And again, you couldn't have paid me to not be a virgin on my wedding night. And I later on, I'm struggling not to say lost my faith. I carefully examined it and rejected it is probably more realistic. But I still have that imprinting to get over in my life. So it was a long series of explorations that brought me to where I was when I met Kate and really ready for anything sexual.
Wow. That must have been a trip to realize you had these burning desires inside, and then to meet someone who reflected a willingness and curiosity to jump in.
Well, a lot of how I was raised, and you can see it in the example of my parents, that I thought that women who really enjoyed sex in a creative, unrestrained way were creatures of fiction, that they were created mainly by male writers and didn't actually exist in the wild. So to find one who was interested in me was mind-blowing.
Yeah. Wow. I love it. So fast forwarding, you've jumped in, you're exploring these areas of delight with each other. How has that journey been? Has it been like smooth sailing? Have you had some hiccups along the way? And if you've had hiccups or bumps, how have you taken learning from those to still not, shall we say, lose your North Star?
Well, we had what for me was about a decade of ease in the lifestyle. Lovely friendships with casual sex, sprinkled in. And we developed a really great core group of friends, and we started throwing house parties, and we expanded our friend circle. And it was just a beautiful time of, social and sexual expansion. For Liam, it was a little trickier because his performance anxiety persisted. And so,
and tended to dominate all my interactions. So if it wasn't a factor in terms of my actual performance, it was a sense that threat is there and could happen at any time, and that I didn't have control over it.
So he would hang back a little bit. We'd throw these parties and I'd be downstairs, lying on the big bed in the middle of a crazy orgy, and Liam would be upstairs in the kitchen talking to that last person upstairs, right? So that was kind of, that's kind of a snapshot of what a lot of our sexual adventures were like, at least emotionally. But then this past year, I was feeling kind of arrogant, like, I got this, no problem. I'm like an expert at the lifestyle. But then Liam started really wanting to date separately and have separate relationships. So it wasn't just sex then, it was, an emotional connection. And it wasn't with us, it was, excluding me. And so I I hit the wall really hard and felt very threatened by that. And so we've had a year of turmoil. And every time he goes on another date, I'm just re-triggered. And so, my I realize that you never know what's going to, put you over the edge. Like you take a step and that feels good, and the next step feels good, and then you realize, oh shit, I'm falling off a cliff. So, with this lifestyle, you never know what step is going to, be the one that triggers you. But inevitably, when you push boundaries, you're going to come up against things that are difficult and things that trigger, deep insecurities and fears. And so we've been pushing that growth edge really hard this year. At least I have, and I think we jointly have learned a lot. We've gotten into counseling with a non-monogamous therapist and have, learned a lot of things about ourselves, but it's been really challenging.
Wow.
And I can just, if I can turn back the wheel for just a second, you actually have personal experience of me and my struggles in the lifestyle and the ways I would go about containing it. So we were involved in a group sex situation before with you and your partner. And do you remember what I was doing during that?
You made some amazing art.
Right. Right.
Yes, that's right.
But that's what a person who's trying to check out of the sexual performance aspect of the engagement does. They find another excuse to be there that doesn't involve them performing. So it doesn't stand out per se. Like someone says, oh, that's just someone who prefers to shoot some video. But if you have the right lens on, you can say, oh, there's someone trying to escape engagement.
Yes, in terms of the specificity of touch and things like that, and those pieces, but just as a reflective lens sharing, it added a high degree of eroticism for myself, I can speak for, and for my partner, even though she was blindfolded. The eroticism of knowing that voyeuristic eye was in the process, but not in a lecherous way, but in a tender way, added a very strong thrill to the scenario. So I can understand your lens, and at the same time, I can see other components to that lens that make it multidimensional. And the reality is the video creation that you put together is still one of the most erotic pieces of video art that we've witnessed. And, you might say I've looked at a few things in my time. So, I feel like for myself, I can say that with great confidence that yours is up on the podium. So I can understand your personal journey in there and that as a process of doing that, but I can also thank you deeply for doing it. And I would also say that at the beginning of that, you were interacting, because I do believe that you gave my bottom a nice flogging.
Oh,
yes.
Was that you?
Yes,
that was. Which incidentally was the first time I experienced actually creating a sense of trust and touch between another man, or a man penis identified owner. I'm not sure. I'll just call you a man. And I'm a man too. Because I've spent most of my life being far more comfortable with male-female sexuality and the expression. It's not that I don't have very dear, close male friends, but that was the first time where I expressly felt comfortable asking and wanting to explore another aspect and a sexual pleasure that wasn't directly about me interacting with a woman. So
right.
Well, that's one of the amazing things the lifestyle has done for Liam, is it's helped him realize he does have a bisexual interest, and he's had many opportunities now to explore that in just little incremental ways. that he would never have had the chance to do in regular vanilla life. So
Yeah.
that's been really fun to witness.
Well,
Yeah.
I think you touch on an important dimension there too, because what I did with the flogger could have been done by a woman,
Easily.
but the fact that it was being done by a man adds a psychological layer. So it's just like if you have oral sex from a man, it's not much different than it is from a woman. But psychologically, depending on how you're raised and how you look at these things, it's very different. And in some ways, it has a unique pleasure to it that is distinct because those are a man's lips or because those are a man's hands.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a dimensionality of exploration that can be deeply profound. That's kind of a redundancy saying profound and deeply, but let myself go on the English language there. Yeah, so taking that idea, there's two things there. I still would love to delve more into your expression of sexuality, Liam, but I'm also very interested in what Kate was sharing. So I'm going to do a coin toss, but I'm not going to actually toss the coin for a heads or tails. I'm going to say, which one of you would like to take all right, Kate, let's start with you. Liam, we're coming back to you.
Hang on it.
Yeah. So Kate, if you're okay with this, let's look at that proverbial wall that you found yourself having a facial interaction with, of hitting up against the wall. You've mentioned that you see some professional help from, a counselor who has focused around consensual non-monogamy. What's that journey been like for you? And are you still seeing the value in the lifestyle, as it were? And how are these things influencing your communication, your self-love and appreciation? Can we jump into that a little bit?
That's huge. Okay. So yeah, so we've learned a lot of interesting things that we now have in our toolbox. So we learned about attachment styles, and we learned that I am anxiously attached and Liam is mostly secure but verging on avoidant attachment. So that's kind of a toxic combination when in conflict. So I go to, clinginess and needing reassurance, and he goes to stepping away and cold logic. And so that's been, it's been revealing to see that that's a pattern that we've had throughout our relationship, where, I just kind of want some comfort and assurance, and he wants to be very cool and logical. And I feel kind of abandoned in my need for just like visceral connection. So that's been helpful. We've really delved deeply into the Enneagram and how we are these two different types. I'm a 1, a perfectionist. He's a 3, a performer. And so, we kind of butt heads within our relationship, and we take very different approaches to the lifestyle. So we've gotten these interesting tools and techniques to help us kind of reframe each other. So rather than saying, I don't know, you did that to me, I can step back a little bit and say, oh, that was an interesting moment of my anxious attachment coming up against your avoidant attachment. And let's do a meta-analysis of what's going on here. So that's been helpful. But those tools they're not always online when you're in the midst of conflict. So it's been more a thing that we can use to dissect our conflict once it cools down. But yeah, I've done a lot of thinking back to my childhood, and there have been some things that have become more clear to me about how I was raised and how problematic some of the things my mother in particular did. And so it's been, I think, fruitful to be forced to face, like, where does my anxious attachment come from? What am I so afraid of? Do I really think him going on one date is going to mean he's leaving me? Like, why do I think that? That's kind of crazy. So I think there's been some fruitful work digging deep and really trying to figure myself out, figure each other out. And it was complicated by the fact that during this year, I had a 1 year long relationship with a woman. So I had my first girlfriend. And so why was it okay for me to do it and not okay for Liam to do it? I had this cognitive dissonance going on. And aspirationally, I want to be the confident woman who can say, yeah, just go out on all the dates with all the women. I know you're coming back to me. But I had to face the fact that I'm not as confident as I would like to be. I'm not as cool as I aspire to be. So that's been a little humbling too. And yeah, it's been hard. Every time I feel like, okay, I'm ready now, I've got this, he'll go out on another date and something else will trigger me, and I'm like, oh shit, we're back here again. Like I'm not fixed yet. So it's hard. It's been a process, but I think a worthwhile process. And I feel confident that at the end of this, we're already seeing a little bit of this happening, that we're stronger, we're more connected, we understand each other better and are better able to communicate and prioritize each other. So I think it's been worthwhile, but hard as fuck.
Wow. Firstly, thank you for sharing that. I know that's some very vulnerable, intimate sharing, and I can definitely see and sense, the challenge of, but the fact that you've been up for it, to get to know yourself, to know your, shall we say, your roots of some of these tendencies and behaviors, and to work with your partner and your partner to be doing the same. That's some really deep, beautiful work. I find it interesting in the sense that it's something that's paralleled for many, many of the people that I've talked to for the book, that the need to understand, like, attachment style has come up in many of the conversations. Childhood trauma, be it capital T or lowercase t trauma, and understanding how those things play into our attachment styles. So I find it kind of beautiful that so many people are willing to journey onto those areas that are very uncomfortable. They're not easy. And they're not like a switch where you're just fixed and, you go off the factory floor all repaired and off into life. They're a journey. I've consistently visualized it as like a volume gauge. When you turn the stereo or the television on, it can be, let's say it goes to 10, or for some it goes to 11. And the goal of all of those explorations is to be able to self-regulate the volume switch yourself. So if you are in a moment of crisis and it feels like an 8 out of 10, can you pause? Can you regulate enough to go, I could turn it down to 7, and 7 doesn't feel as loud as 8. And that unto itself is a fucking victory. But it doesn't mean that the volume won't slip up again and go back up to 8 or higher. But it's this consistency of knowing that it's your hand that can go onto the volume control, versus it just being, shall we say, autonomical or triggered. And there's no like, wow, who's going to put their hand on the control and turn it down? Like, a lot of us look to these external regulations, like, my partner should not do that because it does this to me, right? And it's just, we're giving away power. And they're the hardest things to rewire, because when I look at like our media, like our books, our movies and everything, they're not portraying those controls. They put, these idealized romances or these massive gestures of romance that are meant to fix, or, like knight in shining armor crap, and they've got nothing to do with real life. And so I think it's beautiful that you have journeyed there to put your hand onto the volume switch, both of you. I think that's phenomenal.
And it has reawakened some of the things I thought I had overcome. So some anxiety, depression, and disordered eating things have come back in a way that has surprised me. And, you know, it just reveals that those things were never, they weren't gone. They were just pushed down. So to have them come out, you know, in connection to your partner, where you're forced to talk them through with your partner and kind of reckon with each other, like, whose responsibility is this? And yeah, I think it's been productive and worthwhile, but it has made me question, should we continue in this lifestyle? You know, maybe even take a break for a little while we reconnect and kind of recenter and reprioritize each other. So even yesterday, I was talking to the therapist about, is it good for me to be in this space where I get kind of a high from being in a lifestyle space where I feel very desired, and I feel like I'm getting a lot of the affirmation that maybe should more rightly be coming from my partner, and how much is the lifestyle kind of filling gaps that we really should be paying attention to? um yeah, and you know, when you get to a point where we look back over the last 3 months and almost all of our sexual encounters with each other have been in the presence of other people, I start wondering, hold on now, is like, what is our authentic desire and connection for each other?
Has the enhancer become essential?
Right. Yeah. So do we need to have these other people there in order to feel aroused and connected? And how healthy is that? So it's really forced us to ask some difficult questions that we don't really know the answers to, because we're deeply embedded in this community now. You know, all of our friends and all of our travel and now my job are all related to the lifestyle. And so it's hard to know how to even take a step back if we need that, if that's the healthy thing for us to do. It's tricky. So it forces you to ask questions that you would never have to ask in vanilla life, which I think is probably ultimately a good thing, but it's tricky.
Yeah. Tough questions, you know, and they come up in all kinds of things in life, like, you know, what's my purpose? What's my passion? What am I going to do with my remaining years as we get older? Which is something like a 20-year-old's probably not going to ask themselves. You know, what's my relevance? How am I still fueling my own life and showing up with vibrancy? Those are really pertinent things. And I think we rarely take the time to recalibrate our minds over things like expectations. Like, for example, on a just a simple male anatomy level, as a teenager, the horniness, regardless of if you have someone to share it with, was chronic. Like, I would masturbate 7 times a day and still be like, this is not enough, kind of thing. I mean, that may have gone on into my 20s. I don't know. But, you know, at this point in my life, in my 50s now, my mid 50s, I'll often forget, fuck, I was going to masturbate today. I forgot. And then I get down on myself for like not honoring my sexuality, but I'm honoring so many other things in my life, like that I want to do, say, creatively, or that are purpose driven, that are taking the energy that might be there and putting it into other places. And I bring that up in the sense that maybe I need to recalibrate my expectation that I'm not masturbating 7 times a day, and that maybe that was a bit excessive, but was a point in time that was relevant. But there are other things that are relevant now, and maybe defining how I show up for myself in that way, for, shall we say, in a self-care way, is more important to recalibrate to the me of now than the me of back then. And I think that's also very true with relationships. In the beginning of a relationship, a friend of mine coined the term fuck fog, you know, where you're so enamored by the person, all kinds of things are just fogged out and you don't see, you know. And then after a while, maybe 6 months or so, it seems to be about the period, you start to actually see some of the things like their personality and other things like that starting to come through. Or 10 years in, 15 years in, what, you know, what are those calibrations of intimacy or the expectations, and how much of them really sit within us or have been implanted or imprinted within us from, you know, like, oh, until death do us part, which has all these romantic connotations to it that are probably very hard to sustain, over the long haul, especially because when "till death do us part" was put as a phrase, we didn't have the life expectancy that we have now. So, that could have been 10 years and done, right?
Well,
There are all these interesting topics of recalibration. And I think so many of us are so avoidant of that it's easier just to be like, no, I'm focused on the kids, I'm focused on my career, and not ask those questions. And I think more than any other thing I've seen, consensual non-monogamy puts those questions up front and center as something that will, if you don't answer them and work with them, or maybe not answer them, but at least ask them and listen to see if there is an opportunity for an answer. So it puts you into some very uncomfortable situations, but boy, I personally wouldn't want to be anywhere else. I don't want to ignore those kind of ruminations. I'm curious by them. I have to apologize. I actually need to prep for another type of meeting, a work meeting. I would love to circle back for round 2. I do have some notes on some topics that I'd like to continue as well as explore. Would that be something you're open for? Round 2? Oh, wonderful. I also want to say, Kate, if I can, you have a glow about you that seems lighter in its energy than when we met a year and a half ago. So I know, because I've also listened to your blog, that there have been some journeys and some questions, but the process seems to have created a lightness in you that is wonderful.
Interesting. I would not have guessed that. I would have guessed there was a darkness, but it's good that you're seeing something different.
Yeah, well, they're all lenses, right? Like inside our own heads, we can often feel all kinds of things going on, and we can often be our own worst critics, for sure. I mean, I don't know anyone that isn't, but sometimes it's that lens of perspective sharing back or sharing that can make us go, such as Liam, your propensity towards to video photography art during a moment where you could be, shall we say, doing something else.
Yes, there were options. And yeah, so the option I chose says a lot about me.
In that moment, yeah, but all good. All right, lovelies, thank you so much, and I'll share the recording out of this so you can have that, and then I'll send through some of the other topics that we can look at to schedule up for a round 2.
That would be great.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing. It's lovely to see you both again. I look forward to seeing you in under a month.
Yes.
Oh, you're going to be a flirtation?
Yeah.
Excellent. Okay, great.
Anorexia, I've got to do something. I'm as pasty and as white as you can get. Like, I need some nudie time in the sun.
Good. Good.
Yeah.
We'll see you soon and look forward to it.
Sounds great. Take care.
Bye.